FM Training TV. Real quick, if you want to visit the FM Training TV website, you can see the upcoming schedule. Today is HOnza Day. It's really not performance tuning. It's really on the new FileMaker 19.6. So I said, are you clear to share this? Claris actually specifically said, are you allowed to share this? Because she's not really sure. It's like, hey, can you share this? Right? And it's like, it's 19.6. We can't talk about it. Everyone else is talking about it. So this person, and I want to be very clear about this, I am not doing this. This is on our guest star. And I've officially warned him that it might be bad. So if I go to 24U software, and I put FileMaker just to make sure it goes to the right place, 24usoftware.com. This is a really interesting, probably one of the bigger FileMaker consultancies in Europe. I don't know how many big ones there are, but he's definitely one of the bigger ones. And we have him on the show periodically. So this is HOnza. I'm not sure why it's a capital O, but it's capital H, capital O, then NZA. Really sharp developer. He's got some great products. He does a lot of custom solution development like myself, but he has a lot of vertical market products. In fact, that was him right there looking the other way. So this dude with the glasses right here, in fact, is that the guy who flew around the helicopter? It looks like the guy flew around. Is that the guy I flew around the helicopter, HOnza? Is that him?
Yeah.
That is him. That is him, right?
Well, no, you mean the customer? No.
Okay, not that customer. Okay, yeah. So this is HOnza when he's actually at Amazon AWS trying to hack their servers from inside the building. So yeah, very questionable individual, HOnza. So I'm going to quit sharing my screen, and we're going to have HOnza share his screen. So HOnza, what are we talking about today? So just to be clear, this is a feature on a version of FileMaker that's not been released.
Well, kind of. Actually, there is something in FileMaker already, and that's called transactions. It is there since the beginning, but what is the most exciting thing that has been announced publicly, and it's the most exciting new feature we are going to get in the next version, are native transactions, which means that in order to make changes in data as a single transaction in multiple tables, multiple records, whatever, the thing that we need to do is simply add 2 script steps there. So this is the exciting news that we are getting, and I am actually trying to, or wanting to look at it from the performance perspective. So the key question that I was trying to answer, and I'm going to share what I found out, just adding these 2 script steps will make significant performance impact.
I would vote yes, it should. I will vote yes, it should.
So the key pain point when working with FileMaker over a slow network, especially network with high latency, that means that it takes a long time for data to arrive from the client to the server and back. So the main pain point in this situation is that when you modify data, and when you, let's say, modify data in 1,000 records, you have to send a single, for every single of those 1,000 records, FileMaker sends data to the server and waits for the response before it can send the other one. So let's say if the latency, if the time it takes to reach the server and get the response is 1 second, you can imagine that modifying 1,000 records is going to take about close to half an hour. And so this is something that we would like to minimize. And
okay. Can I ask a question first? I understand. I understand what you're doing, what you're presenting on. Can I ask that you explain what transactions are? Because you're talking about using transactions in a kind of interesting way for performance tuning. But can you explain what transactions are? Not even considering that. Why would you have, like, if Todd Guy says, I love transactions, why does normal people like transactions? Why? Can you explain that?
Okay, so basically, let's say you have an invoice and you have 10 line items there. and you change one line item, and then for any reasons you have something in the invoice record that needs to be recalculated to match that line items in the invoice, and you want that to always match. So for instance, if you change that line item and forget or get interrupted before updating the invoice record itself, you will get invalid data. This is a good reason to use transactions, because transaction is basically something that either completely fails or completely succeeds, but there's nothing in between. So if you modify 10 records, if you do it as a single transaction, there's nothing like that 9 records succeed and 1 fails. With a single transaction, either all 10 records succeed or all 10 records fail.
Okay, so let me state this one other way, the very similar sort of way. So Margaret, if you could go back, be able to pin back to me briefly here. So here's the deal with this, and he said this very accurately, but I've got some newer people here, so I'm going to rephrase it for some of you. Sometimes when you do data entry in a FileMaker with part of a workflow or a process, you might bring up a window and you might input data into, say, for example, some global fields. And at the bottom of the global field, you say, do this work or complete this work or something like that. And so you put data in the globals, like for example, if you're going to create a new record somewhere, and you really want a tight professional business solution, you just don't go to like the invoice screen or on a contact screen and click new at the top and then partially do some stuff, and then about halfway through you decide to cancel and unwind it, right? A lot of times in FileMaker we will make sure that we're not creating bogus empty records by accident by having someone fill out some globals, for example. Then at the end of that process, say confirm I want to do it or cancel. And what happens is that with the current FileMaker system, you can do that. And so then say you say, do it, go for it. So that script is going to say, go to the right table, create a new record, and it starts doing set field commands out of the globals into those values. So the script is running, it goes set field, set field, set field. The internet goes out, the power goes out, someone kicks the cord on your computer. And so your script was running and stops halfway. And then what happens is FileMaker, in a lot of situations, we'll see that partial data and it will just save it. It'll see that you're disconnected. It will save that partial record. It creates these partial financial transactions. So finance people, accountants, things like that really hate it when the numbers don't match. If you create a record or set of records in FileMaker where the numbers don't match, the financial people freak out. That's why if you're really a professional database system and you've got deep financials, things like that, you want to make sure that the records are fully complete before they're written to the drive. That's the idea of transactions. It's something that FileMaker has never done easily. And so I'm just rephrasing it. I've taken time from HOnza, so I'm not going to, you get all the time you want, HOnza. It's not a problem. But it's interesting what he's doing, because I think he's going to show by using some of these techniques, we can do things faster in FileMaker, not so much to protect an incomplete record, but maybe it runs faster, right? So that's what I think he's going. So this is kind of exciting. So HOnza, I am now going to shut up and let you run this, okay? So I am done. There you go.
Okay, so let me just continue with what you said. Basically, transactions have existed in FileMaker since the beginning, but and if you are interested in doing this in any version of FileMaker, look for stuff by Todd Geist and Danny Mac. There are a lot of guides how to transactionally modify multiple records in multiple tables, but the key is it's extremely complicated stuff, and it's simply not easy to do it. And what we are going to get, and this used to be a secret, but it was publicly demonstrated specifically by Danny Mac in the Author Enter Live conference in the summer, and it's available on the YouTube channel of Claris. So I'm not sharing any new stuff that has not already been published. And what we are going to get is this easy way to do it. So instead of the complicated way that has been possible until now, what we are going to get is that simply by specifying that now everything from this moment is going to be a single transaction, and FileMaker is going to do it for us. So it's a very easy thing. And one benefit, which is the main reason for people using transactions, is the data consistency or data integrity. But because we know that specifically on wide area network, where the latency is high, one of the disadvantages of FileMaker is that the protocol between the client and the server is quite chatty. So whatever you do in FileMaker, it needs to talk to FileMaker server all the time. When you enter a field, when you make a single change, it needs to send the server information. Hey, I'm modifying a record. Look it for everyone else. When you commit the change, it sends the data to the server and says, well, these are the changes. Save them, commit them, and distribute them to all the other users. Another disadvantage is that FileMaker is record based. So if you have a record with 1,000 fields and you only modify one field, it always sends all the 1,000 fields to the server. So from network usage perspective, it's quite a lot of communication between the client and the server when you modify records. And when you modify multiple records, like in this example, I'm looping through 1,000 records, it takes a lot of time. My thinking was, okay, so if I don't modify every record as a single step, which would be like, hey, open the record, close the record, commit the record, change this, go to the next one, open it, change it, commit, and so on for 1,000 times. If I do it as a single transaction, my thinking was, okay, so there will be much less messages going from FileMaker Pro to FileMaker server and back. So naturally, the higher the latency is, the savings should be also higher simply by using transactions. And with performance optimizations, everyone is looking for low-hanging fruit. So people don't want to spend hundreds of hours optimizing their code to make it run a little bit faster. They want something very simple, very easy that they can modify or put in the code and expect to have significant speed improvement. So that's what I tried. I tried these transactions with a loop that modifies 1,000 records. And I also tried it to use around the replace field contents, which should have minimum impact, but I was wondering whether it has impact or not because it's a single script step. It modifies 1,000 records, but it's a single script step, so it should be able to do it efficiently even without the transaction. So it should not actually have impact, but I tried it as well. And what I did is there is a way how to monitor what's happening when FileMaker Pro communicates with the server. You can use a file called release debug on.txt, which causes the FileMaker Pro to generate a log file and show every single call that it sends to the server and the response. So I was wondering what happens behind the scenes when I don't use transactions and when I use them. And I can show it live, but it's easier if I just show what I recorded when I was trying it.
You're going to turn on that log function? You're going to demonstrate that? Is you going to do that?
I did that and recorded it as a video. So
Okay.
I will just play the video now.
Okay.
And basically in here in this video, I have the modified bench test, where I added the test with the transactions. Here is the terminal window where I monitor the log. This is the release debug on.
Okay. Can you zoom in a little bit because we can't read that text. It's too.
So this is the
There we go.
release. This is the release debug on text file. So just by creating this text file and putting it in the FileMaker application folder, the FileMaker, when you launch it, will generate a log file. It's called dbdebug.log. And here I was simply monitoring the log live with a terminal by using the tail -f, which is a neat way how to monitor logs live on a Mac. It can be done on Windows as well, but it's a little bit more complicated. You have to use PowerShell and get content command. So if you want to know how to do it on Windows, just drop me a note and I will send you that syntax. So here what I was doing is I just was seeing what's happening, and I also use this network link conditioner to simulate slow network. So this tool from Apple let me set up, slow the network down and set the latency the way I want it. So in this case, I set the delay for both upstream and downstream to 5 milliseconds, which adds up to a latency of 10 milliseconds. So the time to send the packet to the server and get the response back is at least 10 milliseconds in this case. And what I tried first is I went to the bench test file. Yeah, here I also just verified the latency. So it's really showing, well, that was a low latency because it was a local network. And when I turned it on, the slowdown, and try to measure the latency again. So now you see I get about 15 milliseconds. So it's definitely more than 10. And now you see in this log that it's showing what's happening between the client and the server. So I just set the limit to 1,000 records to go through. And the first thing I tried is replace field contents. So you see that it's replacing contents in 1,000 fields. Around 500, it changes. So what you could see here in the log is that the requests that were sent to the server were basically requests to log a record. So for every record, it sends a request to log the record so that no one else can modify it. When it reaches about 500, it starts sending the modifications to the server. And you see the progress bar here is stuck. So it's stuck at 524. And now it started continuing. And now it's all again locking records in the second half. And when it reaches the end, remaining is 12 records, it's commits the changes again. So it's kind of doing the applying the changes in chunks of 500 records. Let me fast forward a little bit. So this took about 75 seconds to execute. Now, when I tried the same thing just with transactions, it was a little bit different. It went through all the 1,000 records to log them. And only after that, it started modifying all the 1,000 records. So there is a difference between non-transaction and transactional use of replace field contents. But even what's more interesting is how it behaves with the loop set field. So as we go to the next test here, the next one is set field in a loop through all the 1,000 records. And what's happening here, you can easily see that for every single record, it sends the log and then it sends the commit. And fast forward to the next test, doing the same thing with transactions. And this is quite important thing. It does not send the commits, but it still sends a request to the server for every single record. And the main reason is when you modify a record, even though it's in a single transaction, you need to log it ahead to make sure that you can modify it. So it's not sending a request to log all the 1,000 records at once, but for every single record that you modify, even in a transaction, FileMaker Pro sends a request to the server to log that record so that other users cannot modify it. And after it logs all the 1,000 records, what then does happen at once is the commit. But it's still not just a single request. It's actually split to multiple requests, and those requests are about 1 megabyte each. So depending on how much data you are modifying or how much data you need to send to modify your records, it still generates multiple requests, but it definitely takes less time to do it. So if I close this video and go to the results here, so these are the details that I collected, and I was trying with 3 different settings of the latency. I was trying with 10 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, and 500 milliseconds. With replace without transactions, so this was replace field contents over the 1,000 records. What happened was that it sent 500 logs, then it sent 33 requests to change records, 1 megabyte each, and then it sent a commit, and then it continued with the other 500 records. When I enclosed the replace field contents within a single transaction, it sent all the 1,000 logs at once, then it sent 68 requests with the data change, and then it did a single commit. I see there are some questions, so let me answer some of the questions, and then I'll continue. Okay, so I see David was asking when opening a transaction means it's processed in the server. The commit is always processed by the server, but it's sent to the server to do the commit. The point with the transaction is that all the changes from opening the transaction are only cached on the client, and then when you commit the transaction, that's the moment when all the changes are sent to the server. So as an alternative to committing the transaction, you can also cancel the transaction. If you I don't know if it's called cancel or undo, or I don't recall the terminology, but basically, if you don't commit the transaction, it just doesn't send it to the server and unlocks the records that you have logged. So the difference is simply that instead of committing every single change as a step, it sends all the commits as a single commit in the end. Let me continue with my findings. So this was replace field contents, and now with the set field in a loop without transaction, so without using the new feature, it didn't send just 1,000 requests to the server. It was 1,003. I didn't have enough time to investigate what the 3 extra requests were for, but it may be some overhead of managing the fact that I'm opening the first record. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what these 3 extra requests were for, but in the log they seemed like almost the same as the 1,000 other ones. But anyway, it was 1,003 requests and 1,003 actions, and each action consisted of 3 requests sent to the server. One was the log, where the client asked the server to log the record and was waiting for confirmation from the server whether the log succeeds. Then the second request was to upload the changes, and the third request was to commit the change. And the commit was actually implicit because in the loop I was going to the next record, and when you go to the next record, even if you don't explicitly commit the change, going to the next record does commit the record that you are going from. So if we if we have the 500 milliseconds latency, modifying a single record with these 3 requests will take 1.5 seconds. So you can easily imagine that 1,000 records will require 1,500 seconds to execute at least. If you have unlimited bandwidth and your only limiting factor is the latency. So it's in line with my measurement actually. Now, when I use a single transaction, there still needs to be 1,000 logs. So it still has to take some time to log all the records. Then, as I mentioned, the changes are uploaded in 1 megabyte chunks. So if you are making changes in big records or changing a lot of data, it's still not going to be sent as a single request to the server. So in this case, it was 68 requests. And then there was a single commit in the end. That took just less than a second. So that was the latency and a little bit extra time for processing the commit itself. So showing it in the chart, this is the structure of what's happening. With the replace without transactions, it's locking 500 records, uploading 500 records. Then there is a very tiny line for the commit here. And then there's locking another 500 records, uploading another 500 records, and committing those 500 changes. When I enclose the replace field contents in a transaction, all the logs were going in a single block, and then all the changes. It even took a little bit longer, but this is not really significant. But the point is that there is a difference between replace field contents within a transaction and without transaction. Then when I use set field in a loop, I could have like a blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red everywhere, but it would be nightmare to build the chart, and you would still see just a like one color blurred. So this set field simply took almost 20 minutes to execute. Set field in the loop with a single transaction took me about 15 minutes. So it was about 1/4, 25% time saving from running this. And these values are from the test where I was monitoring the FileMaker log live. So there was an extra overhead of actually showing the log, writing to the log, and so on. So I tried the same tests without turning on the logging, and collected multiple measurements, and this was the result. So without the extra overhead of monitoring the logs, on the 10 millisecond latency, there was only slight difference between the set field without and with transactions, but all the other stuff, so replace regardless of transactions and the set field with transactions, that all took about the same time. And with the higher latency, you can see that the difference between replace field contents and the set field with transaction is still almost nothing. But the higher latency you get, the bigger is the difference between set field without and with transaction. The conclusion from this is that definitely just including transactions and doing nothing else can save you time, especially if you are using network with a high latency, such as connecting to FileMaker Cloud or FileMaker server running on the other side of the earth, and so on. Let me come up with some conclusions from that. Single transaction can definitely save time, but the key thing is it saves time on commits, but not on record logs. So every single record log still sends a request to the server, and there is a really simple math that comes from this. If you take the latency and calculate the number of records you want to log, you get the time how long it takes to log them. Modification of every record requires log, so the time savings, if latency is your bottleneck, if you have unlimited bandwidth, if there are no other factors, you can save up to 50% of the time, but not more, because there is still going to be a lot of chatting between the client and the server, which you cannot avoid by using this transaction. It's important to mention, however, there are techniques that can help you as an additional thing you can do. So transactions can save you time on the commits, but there is also a way how to save time on the logs. And the way to do it is actually, if you know how many records and which records you want to log, you can build a relationship graph or table occurrence group in your relationship graph that goes through all the records and connects them together. And if through that relationship you try to modify the record on the other side of the chain, that single edit will open and log all the records from the current table occurrence to the distant one. So it's a technique that not always can be used. It's a little bit complicated to understand, but there is a way, and I would say this is the key information. There is a way how to log multiple records at a single time with a single modification. So
that's that old Todd Geist technique for locking the whole thing up, right, through
yeah.
children and stuff. Yeah. Okay, so Margaret, have we been taking questions? Because I asked you that. Hello.
He's got a first question before that. So why not start every script with an open transaction and end them all with a transaction?
Okay, that's a good question, and that actually is related to the next thing which I wanted to mention. There are disadvantages of doing a lot of stuff in a single transaction, because once you open all those records, they get logged for everyone else, and if processing your single transaction takes 10 minutes, then for 10 minutes, no one else will be able to modify those records. They will have to wait for your transaction to finish. So this is the downside of doing a lot of stuff in a single transaction. Also, the longer the transaction is, the higher the chances that something fails, and it's much more difficult to handle errors if they happen inside the transaction. So if there is an validation issue, in the end, when you try to commit the transaction, it fails. And if it fails, then it's very difficult to find out why and where it failed. So yes, adding open and commit transaction is very easy, but the downside is then handling the failures may be significantly more complicated than you are used to. And one of the reasons is that the method or the way FileMaker logs records is something that Vince Bonanno in his session called "Being Optimist in the Pessimistic World." He calls this the pessimistic approach. Pessimistic approach means, okay, let's assume that everyone else wants to modify the same record, So we want to make sure that we first log the record to make sure that we have exclusive access to it, and then we can modify it. That's a pessimistic approach. Okay, so
okay, keep going. We have other questions, just so you know. So don't.
While there is also an optimistic approach. Optimistic approach means, okay, let's prepare all the changes, and let's hope that at the moment we commit those changes, those records will not be modified by anyone else, and that's optimistic approach. And the difference between those two approaches is that, okay, if you use the optimistic approach, it fails, it may be more complicated to either redo the changes or merge those changes, whatever. But the optimistic approach gives us one significant benefit. The time it needs to log those records, it's much shorter. So we and the technique that Vince actually used, which is called local file editing, and I will give you a link to his session to check it out if you don't know it yet. This technique lets you make a lot of changes, send them at once to the server using perform script on server, and then the server-side script applies all those changes in a fraction of a second. So only for the fraction of a second you log those records, you make them inaccessible for other users. While if you use transactions, you still log those records for at least a few seconds, maybe sometimes even for minutes. And you probably already have this experience when you do it manually, not in a script. When you go to a field, make a change, forget to commit the record, and go to lunch. And then all the other users who want to modify the same record become jealous and start yelling at you. You forgot to commit your record, and then developers have to come up with technique how to auto commit records when you get idle for too long time or whatever, because this is the pessimistic approach. Everyone expects everyone else to be to want to modify the same records. So and this is still something that can be a huge performance benefit, because if you use this technique presented by Vince, you actually do send a single request to the server that does all your changes. So you get rid of all those latency, multiple by 1,000 records. You send a single request to the server processes it and send a single response. However, this technique, unlike adding a transaction, which is just adding 2 script steps, this technique requires hours or tens of hours of work to implement. So you will only use it in specific cases where the performance is absolute priority for you, and you can significantly benefit from putting that effort into it. And now the last thing I wanted to mention here is, this leads me to what I mentioned in the beginning, and that's we all like low-hanging fruit. Like we like things that are easy to implement or need zero effort from our side to speed our solutions up. So we always hope, okay, the next version of FileMaker comes and it will make our solutions faster. That's all we all hope for, because that's easy, right? We don't have to do anything and everything will be better. But the reality is we always have to put some effort into it. When FileMaker 19.5 came out, one of the benefits, or one of the new features in FileMaker 19.5 was calculating summary fields on the server. But this only happens in if certain conditions are met, and it only happens if you don't have the data already cached on the local client. So how many of us got really affected by this change? And how many times per day or per week? So it's something that I didn't see a significant impact on any of our customers from upgrading to FileMaker 19.5 solely by having summary fields faster. When we get this new feature, the transactions, and you just switch to the new version, the impact will be none until you go to your scripts, edit them, and add those script steps. But even if you go there and edit your script steps and add the transactions, and you have high latency and you manage to get the 50% savings, it's still just going to be only 50% savings in those scripts that you modify. So you still have to put some effort into it, and it's not a magical speed improvement. The optimizations that our customers like and that we usually deliver are making things 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times faster. Not just saving 50% of the time, but saving 99% of the time spent in logged operations. So that's what people are looking for. And so I would like to ask you to help me with advocating for one suggestion that I posted in the Claris community, and that's speeding up the calculation engine. Because calculations today in FileMaker are used everywhere. They are not only in calculated fields, they are on conditional formatting rules, they are on hide object when rules, they are in button bars, they are in custom menus, they are in tooltips. They are simply everywhere, even in in port of filters, and they are in record level privileges. And with every new version of FileMaker, we are getting more things which can be specified as a calculation and not as a constant. So calculations are used more and more with every single version upgrade. So if the calculation engine becomes twice as fast as it is now, and we upgrade to that version that has a faster calculation engine, with zero effort, every single solution out there is going to get faster. I have 3 links for you here. The first one leads to the Vince Menano's session about local file editing, the session called Being an Optimist in a Pessimistic World. The second one is this getting calculation engine faster suggestion, where I hope everyone will vote for, and with many votes, it will get considered by Claris. And if you have any questions for me, you can get in touch with me and get me on a one-to-one call, and we can discuss any of these topics in detail.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, HOnza. Richard, are you there?
Yeah, no, he's been going, and I don't know where you want to start with the questions because they go way back. So
let's start with the first question. Labo404 wanted to ask, we can use it with the import step?
Well, that's because it's out of context. He wants to know if you can use open transactions, then do an import, then complete the transaction. Does that have any benefit?
Well, I don't know yet. There are script steps which are not supported by open transaction, by these transactions. And honestly, between the different stages and versions, this has been changing. So it may not be final yet what will be supported and what will not be supported. So I don't have the answer yet for this.
Okay. So someone else said, they asked the question, when opening a transaction means is processed on the server. So when you open a transaction on FileMaker Pro locally, can you walk us through the sequence of events of what's happening there? Because remember, we're dealing with a lot of people here who aren't familiar with transactions. This is like really part 2 of a two-part video, but No one software
Mhm.
one, so we have to go back and explain this to everyone, right? So
Yeah, definitely. Well, what happens is it would actually be a good idea to go through the session that Dynamic had, but basically, open transaction just happens on the client where it says, okay, everything from now on in the script in this window. This is important. It's window specific. Everything from now on in this window that you make as a modifications of data, just keep that in a log locally. Do not send it to the server until there is a commit transaction. And so that's what's happening on the client. And when you commit the transaction, that's the moment where the client sends all the updates to the server as a single block. And in the end, it says server, hey, commit these changes. So this is the how transactions work. And as I was showing, what is not cached in this way, what is applied immediately are the record logs. So when you touch a record and you want to modify it, it immediately tells the server, hey, log this record for me so that I have exclusive access to it.
So as you step through records, it's going to continuously to lock things until you
Yes.
hit the commit. And so normally with SQL, you do a commit, you check for an error, and then you do a rollback. Does this support a rollback?
Yes, if the transaction fails, it simply doesn't commit. And you get an error, and it's up to you to check what the error was and where it happened.
Yeah, Ruben, this is a good point. This gets back to commit. So Ruben just posted a comment. Claris Pro is low code. I would argue very specifically that Claris, the FileMaker platform, the Claris platform, whatever the hell we want to call it these days, is both low code. It's also pro code, professional code. It's both. And so it's not one or the other, it's actually both. In fact, most of the revenue that Claris gets today comes from the fact that it's more of a professional code. Most of the Claris revenue comes from developers or customers with substantial solutions like HOnza. HOnza's not doing low code. HOnza's doing professional code because HOnza's a professional developer. I am not. I am just a weekend hack guy. I don't know anything.
Well,
But
I would say this coexistence of low code and pro code is actually one of the biggest benefit of the Claris platform, because the low code aspect is what brings new customers to the platform, and the pro code aspect is that there's a lot possible in terms of expansion of those solutions that started as a low code.
yeah, yeah. So David Angel points out the fact you're right. This should be transparent for developers. So I'm gonna disagree with David just in this one situation. Real quick with you, David. And I'm not picking a fight. I think this is one of those things where, listen, we haven't really needed. Okay, so with the exception of someone like Todd Geist or Danny Mac or someone or HOnza likes to get down in the weeds, this transaction capability, strictly speaking, if you have 1,000 FileMaker professional developers, how many are going to use transactions over the next year for the point of transacting, like making sure you don't have incomplete records? If you had 1,000, or let's just say 100 developers, I would say the number that would use transactions would be less than 15, say 15% on the high side. Okay. Now, if it also comes out that using transactions gives you this performance boost, which we're seeing, then there will be other times to use this. However, the downside is as you tiptoe through the FileMaker solution, you're locking stuff up that other people can't edit. HOnza talked about this. So yeah, you could have it, David, like for example, okay, for example, let me share my screen briefly here real quick. Can I do that? I'm going to help with this real quick because I think this is an important idea here. So I'm in a copy of starting point right here. So this is the important thing to understand about this real quick. Is that the transaction gives you the ability to kind of lock things up and stop things from updating back to the server, but it still causes the locks to happen on the server side. It has to. So if I go to script workspace and I say general, and there's probably a startup script somewhere, trigger, where's the startup? Here's a startup script in FM starting point, and we'll take a quick look at this. So this is FM starting point, the startup script. This is not the worst startup script ever in the world. When this runs, it's going to touch a bunch of different things. Strictly speaking, this is for David Angel, but anyone else interested, you could put a open transaction up here at the top and put a closed transaction at the end, and it would run faster. However, during this process, it's going to touch, for example, the one preference record in the system. And when it touches it, it locks it, and it stays locked until the script finishes at the end. If the script takes 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 seconds to finish, the preference record will be locked, and other people who interact with the preference record will get an error, okay? And so you're like, well, this should just be built in and turned on everywhere, except that what if you just wanted to touch the preferences briefly up here at the top, and then the rest of your startup script was going to do stuff in other parts of the solution. Well, then be better just to change the preference, commit the record, then allow other people to work on it while you go into a different area. But if it was automatic and Claris said, we're going to do this for you because we're brilliant and we know better, and they just turned it on, then as you touch things, you would be locking things up so other people couldn't log onto the file successfully. There'd be all sorts of problems with that, right? And so you want to have the finesse, the precision control to tell the system when to really kind of back things up. A, because you're going to get a performance benefit. Two, there's a critical, like a financial transaction. You don't want half of an order, half of a credit. Like someone processes a credit card with RCC, it goes in through PayPal, and I get half the record. I get a date and a dollar amount, and I don't get anything else. That's horrible. But you could do that right now with FileMaker. It's pretty easy to have that happen. With this process, it locks it. So you're going to evaluate whether does it have to be completely intact, perfectly intact. Two, is there a performance benefit? And three, if I use this, am I going to cause problems for other people? That last one's one we haven't thought about too much. HOnza talked about it. I'm simply pointing out it's a real issue, right? So there you go. Ruben says, HOnza is definitely a pro coder. He's awesome. He built a custom function to generate barcodes or QR codes natively in FileMaker. Yeah, he's pretty sharp about that. Question, so here's a question for HOnza. So potentially you can run your database on FileMaker server and get no benefits from transactions. Correct. They're not on automatically. You have to tell them to be on and then to finish, right? And when you migrate to cloud, you would get benefits from transactions. If you use, so this is all, once again, and this is why version number is so complete, and Claire's running around saying, oh, we don't want to deal with versions anymore. So let me go over here. So we see the various, we have copies of Claris Pro over here, FileMaker Pro over here, starting with 19.6.1, whenever the hell it ships, which is not today. And also on an equivalent version over here, which will not be a 6 dot anything. It won't have a matching number. It's literally kind of this chart mayhem where you have to look it up, but there'll be a version of Claris Pro that's the equivalent of FileMaker Pro 19.6, whatever that's going to be, I don't know. And so if you have those two, they will support that script step, right? I think the server also has to be there to support it too. So if you're using a mix of things that are older than 19.6, you're asking for trouble. This is one of those things you're going to want to get everyone moved over to use this. So if you built it, if you upgrade to 19.6, there's no benefit unless you add these two script steps. If you take from FileMaker Server 19.6 and you go to Claris Cloud Server 2.19.6, it will support it there. If you try to run it on 2.19.5 on Claris Cloud, right, the FileMaker Cloud, their online prem server stuff, then it won't support it. I'm not sure what happens when it doesn't support it. Besides, it'll probably just skip the script step. That makes sense. So it'll just skip. It won't. It'll just ignore start transaction or open transaction or whatever the hell it is, and it will ignore the close transaction. Also keep in mind, if you close that window, it's window specific. When you close that window, that's also the same as ejecting completing the transaction and having it try to reconcile, if that makes sense. So Ruben, does that make sense? So this is a feature specific, version specific feature. So 19.6 or better. It has to be manually enabled in specific spots. It's for professional developers of Ruben, which certainly you are. Okay. It's not designed for people who, listen, if you cannot take and pass a certification test, and or even if you haven't taken it, but you could, right? You know in the back of your mind that you're really that good. If you're not at that level, transactions, you probably ought to stay away from them, right? I mean, you can play with it. Anyone can play with it. But once again, it's a little bit like it's like giving your kid it's a 8-year-old with a power saw in the backyard, electric saw. What is an 8-year-old going to do with a saw? Cut themselves up and probably chop down your fence just for fun. So it's a little dangerous. Just keep that in mind. I would not send a brand new person to do it. I would have someone with at least a couple of years of FileMaker experience, because you have to understand even what record locking is, and then record, open a record, close a record, commit the record, sync error. You have to understand all that before you can understand what a transaction is, right? Makes sense. Ruben says, my main point was that the file must be changed when you migrate to the cloud because of different latency. Well, maybe if you make an assumption that it's going to run if you make an assumption in a local file that it's going to run fast, and then you take the file to a slow environment, why ever that's slow, right? Obviously, you're going to want to take that into account with this, right? If you lock the preference and it's fast and no one notices it, but what if it's slow latency, and you lock it, then someone tries to go into it and they can't write to the preference table for some reason. That's a problem. HOnza, other questions we have, Margaret?
YouTube and Twitch are pretty quiet, so I don't see questions on that end. David Angel is typing, one working local transaction step is not going to work.
When working local transactions, that's not going to work. No, it should, because right, HOnza, do you know about this? I mean, but basically the idea is that saving it to the server should be the same as saving it to the hard drive, I guess, right? I mean, that's also, that's why you don't pull the plug on because what you're talking about is what backup. So it's a really good question, David, but let's logically remember the training from Richard. If you're running a local file, and how do you lose connection with the local file on your hard drive? The hard drive gets unplugged, or the power gets shut off, or FileMaker crashes. What is my rule when running a local file and you don't close the file correctly? You throw the file away and you restore from a backup. So, right?
What I'm saying to my team is there is always a way how to interrupt a script, even if the script has don't allow user abort off, or allow user abort off. There is still way to interrupt the script in the middle. Like you said, disconnecting, shutting the computer off, force quitting FileMaker, whatever. So there is always a chance. The chance is definitely higher if you are connecting to a server, because disconnecting network is much likely going to happen. But there is always chance that this will happen even in a locally open file. So it does make sense to use transactions in a locally open file for data integrity purposes. I think for performance, there is no impact going to be.
All right. Well, I mean, so you're saying use them if it's a local file. Yeah, I just don't. I mean, I can't think of the last time a script failed halfway through and the file didn't crash at the same time. So, but yeah, I guess you'd have to think about that. But because for me, it's an automatic throwaway. That's why we don't run files locally. Because if the transaction didn't complete on a local file, then you'd throw the file away anyway, because who wants to have a corrupted database? But yeah, I get it's a good point. And you can still share your file locally, Ruben. If it's not removed from the product, you should expect peer-to-peer sharing to be removed from the product at any time, at any moment, because that's kind of the way Claris is at least seems to be heading towards this world of the new freemium model. If you want to use files locally, it'll be free. If you want to use a file with a shared with a team, you're going to have to write a check. So peer-to-peer sharing, if it's not dead, will be dying and going away, would be my expectation. So if you're asking me how long that's going to keep working, I don't know. I think that's like people complaining that there's no runtime anymore. I got that last week from someone. Actually, I got an email last week from some person who doesn't speak English. Want to know how they have a FileMaker 1.0 file, and they want to know if it'll work in FileMaker 19. I'm like, dude, I wasn't even alive in 1912 when the Pony Express, we were using horses to go to work. That's that far back. I mean, I started using FileMaker with Pro 2, not even 1. So that's a long time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I started with Pro 2.0 in 1990, 91, 90.
Well, 1991.
That was Pro 2.
Was it?
Yeah.
I started with 1.2.
1.2. Then that would have been probably early 1990 or 89. You must have been like 12 years old, not on a fudge sickle in your backyard playing with FileMaker. Let's see. So Andy Ruben says, question: Get open record state is still needed with transactions. Well, okay. So back up. So if you open a transaction, as you touch records that you need to lock, the server will automatically lock them for you. It doesn't mean that the records are available just because you demand it. I want that record. I demand it right now. Doesn't mean you're going to get it. If someone else is already using the record, you might want to check for that, because your transaction then is gonna, well, you're going to get an error inside that script, whether that is an abortable moment. It's like if you're flying an airplane, you have two engines and one engine goes out. Is that enough to abort and you eject out of the plane? Some jets, yes. Some jets, no. Some jets will fly in one engine. If you write your script to take that into account and it sees a record lock, do you abort, or do you keep going and you kind of work your way around it somehow, right? That's up to you. But we have the tools as a professional developer for you to make that determination. So it's still valid. Just because you say open a transaction doesn't mean that it's like a presidential motorcade. President is driving through town and they're pushing everyone out of the way. It's not like that, all right? All it means is that the from the client to the server to say, save the data and release the records, that is suppressed and held. It's suppressed and held until the window's closed or you hit the close transaction script step, right? How do you know? I'm going to send this one to HOnza. Lynn from Austin says, how do you know if a transaction has failed?
Well, just like any other script step that fails. So you have to check for the last error after committing the transaction.
Yeah. No, and Ruben, I appreciate it, and that's kind of what I try to do here, because HOnza is at a whole level more advanced than I am, so I kind of try to translate between like a Nick level or a HOnza level person and like what I call normal humans who don't, Let's see. David says, think you need to log it in a table is important, not just show a custom dialog. Did you show that log, the bugger log, in your video, HOnza? I missed that. Did you show that?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'll have to go back and watch that. I want a quick shout out. I'm going to share my screen real quick one more time. And I want to tell people that if you are looking for some help, 2-4-U software. There we go. I got to be careful about typing certain domains in because it's beyond not safe for work, like really not safe for work. So yeah, so 2-4-U software, great website. This is where HOnza lives. He's got FileMaker Consulting in Czech Republic, but he's got customers here in the United States. He does all sorts of hardware integration. He's the biggest hardware integrator that I know in the FileMaker platform. I wish I was as cool as he is. See, these are all the little gizmos he has, right? So that's it. HOnza, you have anything else to say besides I want to show people this stuff? And then also, you also have that what's it called? Your Go product.
You mean the Xcode?
Xcode. Where's that at if we want to see Xcode? Where's
under
that?
tools.
Tools. Xcode. Every time I see that, I just think of Xgoat. Like, meh, meh. So Xgoat. So yes, buy, start building apps. If you want to build an app on your iPhone or iPad, you want to do it quick and easy, You don't want to go through the hassle too much. Save yourself some time and effort. Pay what, $200 or whatever it is, and he will kind of help you build out the app. He's not going to build it for you. You have to still build the app, but he compiles it for you and helps you install, go through the compiling process with Xcode. So that's why it's called Xcode with Go in it, right? So, all right, cool. Well, that's it. I appreciate it. Anything else from anyone? Margaret, are we good? We're pretty late today.
We are pretty good. We are good. So,
all right, that's it. I guess I could run the closer. Let me hit the button here for that. Maybe if it goes. Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.